We'll start in 2 minutes.
Good evening, Miss.
Yes, good evening.
Good
We'll
evening.
start, we'll just start in 1 minute.
Please, Miss, discuss design strength of tension.
What?
Design strength of tension. Tension member.
Tension member. Yes, yes. That is
Yes,
what.
yes, that is good.
That is what the topic is for today.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome to week 7 of Design of Steel Structure TA session taught by Professor, the course teacher by Professor Damodar Maiti. I am Srisha Chakraborty, one of the course teaching assistants. I am a PhD student at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. I'll start with a recap. There are two broad branches of structural engineering: analysis and design. Analysis is a forward problem where we are given the structural dimensions, the boundary conditions, and applied load, and we have to find the response induced in the structure, which is of the form of forces, stresses, or deflections and strains. And design is the inverse problem where we are given the load to be withstood by the structure and criteria on maximum deflection. So, in other words, we are given the limit states, the ultimate limit states, and the serviceability limit states, and we have to find the optimum size of the structural elements, the materials to be used, the connectivity, and all that. There may be some restrictions, like the materials might already be mentioned that we have to use this grade of concrete, this grade of steel. In any case, the size of the structural element is always for the engineer to decide. Why do we use steel? Because concrete is the most versatile material for construction. It is cheap also, and it is cast in the site in situ, so it can be cast into any kind of forms or shapes. But steel sections are directly shipped from the industry, and there are some restrictions, and it is expensive, but it has some advantages. Firstly, steel is much stronger than conventional concrete in both tension and compression. Tension, concrete virtually has no strength, so it is all about tension is always taken by steel, even in concrete structures. And even in compression, steel is stronger. Steel is a lightweight structure, so steel is a lightweight material, so it has a very high strength to weight ratio, because its strength is more, its weight is less. Plus, we also, so first, and steel structures are also lightweight, because since steel has high strength, that the we need the steel sections that we use have much smaller dimensions than compared to concrete structures. And steel is ductile compared to concrete, which means that it allows a lot of deformation after yielding. Even after yielding, the stress capacity increases slowly, but the strain increases a lot. So the official, like the technical definition of ductility is, the more the area under the stress strain curve is, more ductile is the material. So in this this is the, like, this is the entire area under the stress strain curve. So this entire area, for the brittle material, it will just go up to yielding and then just break here. The fracture point here in steel is, it goes along for a long distance along the x-axis. Wow, আমি ক্লাস নিয়েছি, তোমাকে পরে ফোন করছি। ওটা জিজ্ঞেস করেছিল অল্প গিফটগুলো এসছে কিনা। ঠিক আছে, ঠিক আছে, টাটা। Yeah, so in a brittle structure, it would just yield and then fracture immediately. So the area covered will be, area under the graph will be less. But why we need ductility is because if ductile failure means that the structure deforms a substantial amount before it actually fails. So warning, it gives warning time if a structure is about to collapse, and that can make a lot of difference in, like, human lives can be saved. And it can also, under, if it is not a very rapid failure, if it deforms, then we can also carry out some kind of repair and prevent the structure from collapsing and save some economy. However, steel is much costlier than concrete, so we don't use steel in all residential, industrial, like residential and commercial buildings. Most of them are made of reinforced concrete. Steel is generally used in more specific or more high demanding structures, like very high rise towers, bridges, etc. We need design because the components individually and the entire structure should withstand the load throughout its lifespan, satisfying the serviceability criteria. Withstanding the load means that it doesn't collapse, obviously. So that is why these limit states are called collapse limit states. Like the bending stress should be less than the ultimate stress, like with the factors of safety. The tensile stress developed in the materials should be less than the ultimate tensile stress of the structure, of the material. All of these are the collapse limit states or the ultimate limit states. And serviceability criteria are related to the serviceability limit states. And a lifespan has to be mentioned since materials undergo degradation with time, like fatigue and creep, and there are some time dependent phenomena that occurs in materials. So we cannot say that if I am constructing a structure today and my steel is has a yield stress of 250 MPa, it is not after a lot of loading and unloading after 25 or 50 years, it will lose some strength. So there has to be a lifespan mentioned associated with any design. And after the lifespan is over, like once it is, we don't have to break down the entire structure necessarily. A major repair or a structural health monitoring engineer should be hired to check whether the structure is still functional. If not, they may need major repair, and if it is in very bad condition, it might need to be reconstructed. To properly design a structure, we have to ensure it is economical to construct without compromising safety. So that is that is what is known as cost effective design, because the safety and economy are is a trade off. If we, the more safe we want to make a structure, we can use higher grades of materials, we can give like wider columns, more steel reinforcement in the concrete, and so on. We will be making the structure safer, but we will also be making it more expensive because the material will cost more money, right? So there is, we cannot make a structure infinitely safe or about as safe as possible. We have to take a call that this much safety is enough. If beyond that, some see, the loads which we take during design are a kind of prediction, right? We cannot exactly say that this is the load that is going to come, it's not never going to exceed that. We cannot say. There can be some, like a very bad earthquake. Buildings collapse during a very bad earthquake because w- they, like the engineers did not know that this kind of an earthquake is going to come. And if you assume the worst earthquake that has ever happened in the history in that region, you might need to over design all the structures a lot. So we could, we cannot, like we could over design all the structures assuming the worst earthquake, the worst wind load that has ever come, but that will make it like not economically viable. So we have to take a call at some point that if we reach a certain safety level, that's enough. And then that is called effective design, and this requires knowledge of the design procedure in detail. Some mechanical properties of steel are taken to be at constant values irrespective of the grade. It is mentioned in IS 800 2007, the Indian Standard Code for Steel Design. Unit mass of steel is this 7850 kg per meter cube. Modulus of elasticity or Young's modulus, which is the slope of the stress strain curve, the initial slope of the stress strain curve when it follows linear behavior. Poisson's ratio, the modulus of rigidity, also called the bulk modulus, and the coefficient of thermal expansion. This is actually quite high, like in steel, in fire resistant design and so on. We might need to consider the thermal expansion as well, because that if a structural member expands, it develops some thermal stresses. So we might need to consider that in the design. These five properties are generally somewhere around these values. Even for different grades of steel, the values which do vary are the yield stress Fy and the ultimate stress Fu. So these are the principal mechanical properties of the structural steel, and they are important in design. So far, whatever design we have seen in bolts or welds or in tension members, we have seen that the structural property that comes up is the yield stress and the ultimate strength. These two, and the geometric properties, the other things that come, like the length of the weld or the diameter of the bolt, those are the geometric properties, and yield stress are the material properties. Rolls Steel section, the Bureau of Indian Standards publishes this IS handbook number 1. We find this in SP6. This tabulates all the weight per unit length, the geometric dimensions, the plastic modulus, moment of inertia, and other dimensions for various types of steel sections. It is, so they are all tabulated, and we can get like read off all those values directly and use them. Generally in subjective exams, this code is SP6 is allowed with you. This is a rolled I section or a joist. This is a rolled channel or C section. This is angle. The two lengths might be equal or unequal. This is a T section. These are hollow sections, square, rectangle, and circle. These are solid sections. These are bars, flats, and plates. And like these are very, they are the square and circular dimensions look like concrete columns maybe, or concrete beams, but in concrete the dimensions are much almost a order higher magnitude. In concrete, it's like the column will be 300, 400, 500 mm, that kind of dimensions. Here it is much lesser because steel has a higher strength to weight ratio. This is the elasticity curve of steel, stress strain curve. So we carry out a tensile test on a specimen, like a cylindrical specimen, for example. We apply tensile load on both its ends. We can fix one end and apply a tensile load. So automatically the reaction here will also be equal to P, and we ramp up the force in. We cannot generally do it in a continuous way, so we increase it in discrete steps. And after each step, we pause and measure the strain. There are measurement devices like strain gauges, and then when this force is divided, the force which we are applying, we divide it by the cross sectional area to get the stress, and we plot all the points. Initially the stress will be zero, the strain is also zero. Then as we increase the stress, strain also increases. So it follows a curve something like this. Not all grades of steel have identical. In fact, this is hot rolled steel. Cold rolled steel has a different kind of behavior, but this is a general trend. So up to A, the graph is a straight line, so it follows Hooke's law, a linear elasticity. From A to B, the graph is non-linear, but it is still elastic. Elastic material means that if I remove the load completely, it will come back to its original configuration and the strain will go down to zero. So the curve goes up to B, and if you remove the stress, it retraces the curve and comes back to the origin. After B, it is no longer perfectly elastic. So if you have crossed B and gone somewhere between B and C, even if I remove the force completely, there will be some strain left. So it won't actually come back with this path. It will come back in some path like this parallel. So there will be some permanent deformation or set, which is residual strain, you can say. Then after C and D are very close space. They are generally it's not, we don't get a difference like this. It's generally just one point. And after that, we can see that there is a substantial drop in the slope. The slope here was approximately like quite high, and then suddenly it drops down. So that is called the yield point. C is the upper yield point, D is the lower yield point, and generally either of these two or the average of these two you can consider to be the yield stress. So the stress corresponding to this will be the yield stress Fy. And then after that, when the slope has reduced, this is where the ductility of steel is being exhibited. So we increase the load, the strain increases rapidly, and but the stress does increase somewhat. So it this is not the ultimate capacity. The ultimate capacity of the material is this E at E. So this, the stress corresponding to this, like if you draw a line parallel to the x-axis and measure this stress, that will be the ultimate stress Fu. And then after E, the material gives way, it flows and it fractures at F. So beyond E, there is no point in loading it because it's anyway going to fracture. Okay. So these are the material points. Like A is the limit of proportionality, B is the elastic limit, C and D are the yield points, E is the ultimate or maximum tensile stress, and F is the fracture point. Modes of failure in steel structures: bending, local buckling, shear buckling, web crushing and buckling, and lateral torsional buckling. Bending and shear are the common ones, which it's easier to perceive, and all these buckling modes are triggered in steel structures. They were not there in concrete structures because steel structures have a high slenderness ratio. Slenderness ratio means that the ratio of the cross sectional area to the, I don't know, the length divided by the cross sectional area. So it's a slender member, means that it has a it is very long, and comparatively the cross sectional area is less. This is a qualitative way of telling it. There is an actual slenderness ratio calculation which we will see when we study compression members, because buckling is a phenomenon that only occurs under compression. If you pull a, like when you're pulling or applying tension to a thin member, it is not going to buckle. When you push the two ends, it has a tendency to buckle. So all these buckling modes, but then again, buckling does not occur only in when the whole member is in compression. It can also be that, like suppose a member is under, suppose it's a beam and you are loading at the midpoint. Suppose it's a I section. The point at which you are loading, if it is a point load and not a uniformly distributed load, then at that point the channel part I section, the web also is a slender member itself. So there is a chance of the local buckling. So this web crushing and buckling is a local buckling phenomena. And lateral torsional buckling is a whole, like the entire section twists. So we'll look at all of that. And deflection is a serviceability limit states. These were all the ultimate limit states. The design philosophies are working stress method and limit state method. Currently, the IS codes follow the limit state method, so that's what we are following. The basic the basic philosophy is design action should be less than the design strength. So what we do is that we the projected the expected loads, we multiply that by some partial safety factor to increase the load, like the load. So we'll assume that the load is higher than what we are actually expecting, so that makes it safer, hence partial safety factor. And the strength also, the actual ultimate strength of the material, we are going to divide by some partial safety factor. So I'm going to assume that its strength is lesser, that is also a conservative estimate. So both the partial safety factor are approximating my design on the safer side, so that's where the inherent safety is being introduced. Connections we have looked at in the first few classes. They are integral parts of any steel structure that have a major role in the overall integrity. Standard parts are properly connected to create the steel structures. Connections make up a large amount of the cost of structural steel. Connection design should be given top priority for both safety and structural economy. And the two types are bolts and welds. Rivets are not really used anymore, and we have seen the design of bolts, the friction type bolts or the shearing and bearing type bolts, and wells, butt wells and fillet wells. We have seen those designs. And yes, last class we saw the design of tension members. So today we are going to look at some examples. The types of failure that we saw in last class were yielding of gross section, rupture of net section, and block shear failure. So the capacity, the tensile capacity, will be the minimum of these three, because of course if the this strength is 10, this strength is 15, and this strength is 20, then the member will fail at 10 itself, right? So we the capacity of any member is always the least of the whatever the limit states are. For example, in beam design in concrete, because that's what you have you started design with, the two criteria are bending and shear, right? But we only generally designed in, like we only check the bending generally for making the determining the sectional properties, it because it has been studied, and it always sees that bending is the critical mode. So if a beam fails, it almost always fails in bending. So the shear is less critical, so the shear capacity, see the after all, whether it fails in shear or whether it fails in bending, the material only knows that my yield strength or my ultimate strength is getting exceeded. It doesn't know whether it's occurring due to bending or shear. But if the bending stress that is going to come on the for the same kind of loading, if the bending stress being developed in the structure is larger than that developed by the shear force, then bending is a critical mode of failure. So in other words, we calculate the capacity of the section corresponding to all of these limit states, and we take the minimum as a overall capacity of the tension member. Yielding of gross section (TDG). In this type of failure, the yielding of the gross section occurs, which means that a significant amount of deformation occurs before the material actually gets fractured. The deformation makes the structure unserviceable. Rupture of net section or fracture. So gross section occurs not where the bolt holes are. Like where the bolt holes are, we don't consider yielding. We consider yielding in, because the bolt hole is present only in a small part. Even if this yields, the material around this can arrest the excessive deformation. So the yielding is a problem only when the gross section itself fails. That means the entire section has started yielding and flowing a lot. And yielding is like, see this, when this point has been crossed in the net, like in the net section, it starts flowing, right? For a small increase in stress, the strain increases so rapidly. So it can, so it is a serviceability problem. Like if the suddenly the length or it suddenly increases a lot, it might hamper the functioning. So we cannot allow this to happen. Rupture of net section. When the net section of the member reaches the ultimate stress, then rupture or fracture of member takes place. So why are we looking at ultimate here? Because if in this section, where this is the net section, this is the gross section. So you can see that since the cross sectional area in the net section is less, it is obvious that for a constant, like for a single value of stress across the cross section and the net section, it is the net section that is going to fracture first, because that is the critical section here. So if this part ruptures, also failure will occur, but the net section is going to rupture first. So I am not bothering to take rupture of the gross section as a separate limit state, because this is going to occur anyway first, so the structure will already fail, so it won't reach the gross section fracture. So yielding of gross section and rupture of net section, don't confuse these two. And block shear failure is a completely separate kind. It's a segment of the block of the material at the corner of the connection shears out due to possible high bearing strength of steel and high strength of bolts. So what happens here is that if the bolts are too strong and the steel itself is too strong, the bolts don't shear off. We know that the bolt can also undergo shear failure, but the bolt here is strong, and the steel itself does not yield or break, but the structural integrity is somehow lost, so the block shears out. So you can say it's a shear failure because this block, this part, this surface and this surface, this part undergoes shear and goes out, and this surface undergoes a tensile failure, right? You can imagine that, like, um, suppose this shears out. So this part, this surface and this surface are undergoing shear, and this surface is undergoing tension because it's getting pulled apart. Shear is anything where there is a kind of dragging kind of failure. So these surfaces are the shear area. Design of tension member. The design of a tension member is based on two limit states. Limit states based on yield strength of the member due to large elongation, and limit states based on ultimate strength of the member. This limit state is particularly crucial where the section of the member gets reduced due to the presence of bolt hole. So this is a net section thing. So a tension member with bolt holes at the ends for connection purpose, even if subjected to tensile stresses in excess of yield stress, to as high as ultimate stress, the member may not elongate excessively because of the presence of the so-called non-active metal behind the bolt holes in the direction of the tensile force. So the gross sections around it arrest the flow. Just at the point of fracture, the metal tends to narrow out at that point where the fracture occurs, but the additional metal present behind the bolt hole restricts this contraction of the strained metal, thereby increasing the ultimate strength. Thus, fracture strength at the net section passing through the bolt hole is considered as another limit state. So, the design of the tension member is a minimum of these three: design strength due to yielding of gross member (TDG), rupture strength of critical section (TDN), and block shear strength (TDH). So let's look at examples. Determine the design tensile strength of this plate. It has dimensions. The width is 150 and the thickness is 12 mm. Thickness is into the plane. This length is not given because we don't need it, because the cross section is that one. Like this plate is like this. So this is 50, 150, and this is 20. So sorry, 12. So you can see that this cross section is this is what we are concerned about. We are not really concerned about this length. And there are six. The bolt diameter is 16 mm. We are using Fe 410, whose yield strength we know is 250. Strength of the plate is the minimum of these three. So design strength due to yielding of gross section. So what is the cross section area of the gross section? 15 to 12. So Ag is 15 to 12, and Fy is 250 because we are looking at yielding, and there is a gamma which is the partial safety factor in the denominator. We know that we divide the design strength by the partial safety factor to make it conservative. So TDG is 1800 into 250 divided by 1.1 Newton, so 409 kilonewton. Design strength due to rupture of critical section. So there are two critical sections. One is one that passes to bolt hole 1 and 4, and one which passes to 2 and 3, and it's identical because both these sections have two bolt holes each. So this formula here is zero point 0.9 ANFU by gamma M1. So these gamma values are given in IS 800. Okay, and now what is the net area? Like this AN is 150. There are two bolts of diameter 16 mm. IS 800 says that if the bolt diameter is 16 mm, assume the bolt hole diameter is 18 mm. So I have to subtract two 18 mm from 150. So 150 minus 18 minus 18 into 12 is the net area, and here the pitch, we know that this we don't have to consider here, and TDN is zero point 0.9, and into this area into 410 take the ultimate strength here, and gamma M1 which is 1.25, this is also given in IS 800. The different partial safety factors, you don't have to remember these will be provided, I guess. And this is 403 kilonewton. Okay, I'm saying 403, but if you have to round it up, you actually have to round it off on the upper side, so 404 will. No, 1 second. No, sorry. We have to round it down because this is the capacity. So when we are talking about capacities, we have to round it down, because if it can take 409.1 kilonewton, it it will fail at 4, like that is my ultimate. So I cannot say it's 410. I have to say it is 409. And block shear strength, the gross area in shear is okay. So let's look at the shear area. So if this is 150 and these bolt holes are placed at this arrangement is given here, 42.5, 42.5. So this is 65 and this length is also 65 and this end distance is 35. So the block shear area here will be this part. So 65. Uh, so if it shears off, this entire thing is going to shear off. So this entire block is going to shear off. So what is my shear area? The shear area is 35 plus 65. This is the length. 12 mm is the width. So is the thickness. So 35 plus 65 into 12, and the net area and shear is 35 plus wait 65 plus 35 minus 1.85 into 18 into 12. So why is that? Because see, this bolt hole is entirely considered here. This bolt hole has to be entirely subtracted, and half of this bolt hole has to be subtracted because we assume that the shear occurs from at the center of this bolt hole. Even if you approach from the other side, you will end up with the same thing. So 65 plus 35 minus 18 minus zero point 0.5 of 18, so minus 1 minus 9 into 12. That is the net area and shear. 1.4 bolt holes are getting intercepted in shear area. And the gross area and tension will be 42.5, which is this. One second. So this part 42.5 minus half into 18, so minus 9 into 12. This is the net area tension. Block shear strength is the minimum of the following. Shear, yield and tension fracture, tension, yield and shear fracture. So we don't know that which is going to yield first and which is going to fracture first. So we take minimum of the both. So TDB1 is AVG into FY. So this is like, I'm assuming that in shear it yields and in tension it fails. So I take the shear area and multiply it by the yield strength, and I take the tension area and multiply it with the ultimate strength. This root 3 factor comes due to it. I forgot exactly where it comes from. It is there in the formula in IS 800. I think it has something to do with the tension, like the tension and shear interaction diagram. There are shear tension interaction diagrams you would have seen in some IS codes. Some kind. This is some mathematical. It has some mathematical basis, but remember that it comes in the shear factor only, and so 1200 into 250 by root 3 into 1.1 plus zero point 0.9 into 402 into 410 by 1.25. This is the value. And tension, yield and shear fracture. So in tension, it's and this zero point 0.9 comes wherever the ultimate strength comes. Okay, so here also there was a zero point 0.9, just another safety factor. ATGFI. So here I take this area 510 into 250 by 1.1 plus zero point 0.9 into the shear area, which is this 876 into 410 divided by root 3 into 1.25. So we get 265, and TDB is the minimum of TDB1 and TDB2, so I take 265. And now the strength of the plate is the minimum of all three. So this was 409, this was 403, and this is 265, so I have to take 265.2. Okay. Was there any doubt in the question solving?
Madam, please repeat block shear slowly.
Okay, so if if there is a block shear failure, what happens is the this part will shear out. So the diagram here. So what happens is trace a line along the bolts, and this entire part is going to come out. So the shear surface is this and this line is like this is the shear surface area. So this line is 35, plus 65 minus the bolt holes, we'll talk about the later, into the thickness. The thickness is into the plane, so that is 12. So the shear area is basically something like this, like this. So 35 plus 65. Then I subtract the bolt holes because there is 18 here and 9 from here. So 65 plus 35 minus 1.5 into 18, and the whole thing, this is the net length, and I multiply it with 12, which is the thickness. That is the net area and shear, which is 876. The gross area and shear is, we don't like, the gross area is this part, we don't separate bolt holes when it comes to gross area. So 35 plus 65 into 12, that is 1200. Now gross area in tension, the tension is considered to be this part. This is the tension area. So 42, the gross area in tension is, this is 42 into 12, because we don't subtract the bolt hole when it is about gross area. And for net area in tension, we subtract half the bolt diameter, so bolt hole diameter. So 42.5 minus 9 into 12 again. With 12 we have to multiply because that is the constant thickness. So the net area in tension is 402. Block shear strength is the minimum of the following. These two formula are given in IS 800. Let's see. See. So for bolted connection, the block shear strength TDB of connection shall be taken as the smaller of AVG divided by root 3 gamma m0 plus zero point 0.9 ATN FU by gamma m1, all this terminology. So AVG and AVN are the minimum gross and net area in shear along the bolt line parallel to the external force. So I think it shows in some diagram. It should. Yeah, it shows here. So this will be the shear area. Uh, if we subtract the bolt holes, it's a net shear area. If we don't, it is the gross shear area. And ATG and ATN are minimum gross and net area in tension from the bolt hole to the toe of the angle end bolt line perpendicular to the line of the force 2 3. So this, and so TDB is the minimum of AVG divided by root 3 gamma m0 plus zero point 0.9 ATN FU divided by gamma m1. Or, so here what is happening is I'm taking the yield strength in shear. So AVG is the gross shear and this is the yield strength. And for tension I'm taking fracture. So FU is the ultimate strength of steel and ATN is the net tension area, because we saw that for yield we consider the gross area and for fracture we consider the net area. And this is the opposite. Here we do, what we do is we take the ultimate for shear. So AVN is the net area and shear, and FU is the ultimate strength, and ATG is the gross area and tension, and FY is the yield strength. So this is yielding in tension, fracture in shear, and the top term is fracture in shear, and sorry, this is yielding in shear and fracture in tension. And remember that the root 3 factor always comes in the shear term, and the zero point 0.9 factor comes when you take ultimate strength. So when there is FU, you multiply with zero point 0.9, and wherever there is shear, you divide it by root 3. So this is what the formula is being applied here. The shear, yield and tension fracture, which is the first combination, we plug in the values. AVG is the gross area here is 1200, FY is 250, and these. So this is a shear term, so we put root 3 in the denominator, and this is the ultimate tensile term. So we put zero point 0.9 into the net area and tension 402 into 410 divided by 1.25. Okay, so these will also be given the factors of safety. Somewhere it will be given, I guess. I have to check where the factor of safety is given, but gamma m0 is gamma m0 is applied in the yielding cases and gamma m1 is applied in the ultimate cases. Since the ultimate strength is a more critical phenomenon, like in a more critical case, we apply a higher factor of safety to make it safer. So 410 divided by 1.25 and 250 we divide by 1.1. So we get this value. And tension, yield, and shear fracture is the opposite combination. We take the gross area and tension and the yield strength, and here we take the ultimate capacity and the net area and shear. So we put these values and we get 265, and the capacity is the minimum of these two. It's 265. Is that clear?
Okay, man.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so this is an angle section example. An unequal angle ISA 90 into 60 into 6 is connected to a 10 mm gusset plate at the end with four numbers 6 and 16 mm diameter bolts. The angle is to be used as a tension member. Find the design tensile strength of the angle if, okay, it matters which leg is connected. Now, if the 90 mm leg is connected and if the 60 mm leg is to be connected, G is the gauge. Gauge here is the like this distance, the distance from the leg to the bolt line. When the 90 mm leg is connected, the strength. So when the 90 mm leg is connected, what happens is this dimension is 90, okay, and when the 60 is connected, this dimension will be 60, and this line that you can see, it is the outstanding leg. So what it is basically, this is an angle. When you attach this side, okay, let's see. So I'm attaching it like this. So this is being bolted to the plate, and this is the outstanding leg. So the whichever leg is bolted to the surface, that is the that is what the tension member is. So we are not concerned about this outstanding leg, we are concerned about this attached leg. So
Means connected leg and outstanding leg.
yes, connected leg and outstanding leg. So this is here. If and if the connected, if it is an unequal leg angle like this one leg is 90, one leg is 60. So the strength of the tension member will differ depending on which leg I connect to the gusset plate. And this is the gusset plate. What the gusset plate does, it is basically it allows. I'll show a picture because it will be easier to visualize. So what the gusset plate does, it is actually, this is a column, this is a beam. Suppose I need an inclined member, so gusset plate is kind of an intermediary which is attached to all of these. It is attached to this, it is attached to this, it is attached to this. So unlike concrete where everything is cast together, in steel we have to assemble them. Now, so what if 10 members are meeting at 10 or like 5 members are meeting at a single point? How are you going to connect them? The solution is gusset plate. A gusset plate is all the 5 members I want to join. I take one plate, I attach all the 5 members to that plate. So that is how the connection is built in a practical, in a real life structure. Let's see. So see, this is a actual bridge. This is a gusset plate. It's in any structure you can see, in any billboard or in a railway overbridge. If you go and see, you will find these kind of plates. So this is a gusset plate. It is bolted to this, it is bolted to that, it is bolted to this. So all of these, the column, the beam, the struts are all being connected via the gusset plate. So that was just for visualization. In civil engineering, it's very important to visualize things. And so this is the gusset plate, and this is the angle, this is the connected leg, and this the double line here is the outstanding leg out of the plane. Now when the 90 mm leg is connected here, design strength due to yielding of gross section is very simple. It's the gross area, which is from the steel table in SP61. We know that the gross area is this, it is given in the table. 865 into 250 divided by 1.1. The design strength due to rupture of critical section, here there is an extra term here, we'll see in the code. For angles it's a little different. The rupture strength of an angle connected through one leg is affected by shear lag. The design strength is, earlier we saw only this term. We saw only the, like if it's just a plate, we saw zero point 0.9 into net area into ultimate strength divided by gamma m1. Here we have to add this beta term, where beta is, which we have already encountered this before, this term in bolts itself. And beta is 1.4 minus 0.0076 W by T, Fy by Fu, Bs by Lc. And W is the outstanding leg width, Bs is the shear leg width as shown in figure 6. So this this is the shear leg thing, that like this is the outstanding leg, the width of the outstanding leg here is 60, because I've attached the 90 leg to the plate, so the gusset plate, so the 60 is outstanding. And what will be the shear leg distance? It will be this G, right? Because it is from the end of this angle to the first bolt hole, so that is the shear leg width. And Fy and Fu we already know. And Lc is the length of the end connection, that is the distance between the outermost bolts in the end joint measured along the load direction, or length of the weld along the load direction. One second. Okay, I'm sorry. The Bs will be this W plus Wt minus T. This is the formula. So we take the outstanding length divided plus this length, and we mind subtract the T from here. And the Lc, let's see what that is. 3 into 50 here. One second. Anyway, let's go, go to the other things first. And TDN is zero point 0.9. This is the regular term. So this AN will be 90 minus 6 by 2 into 6. And the gross area of the outstanding leg is 60, because 60 is the outside minus 6 by 2. This 6 by 2 is taken because the thickness of the angle is 6. This is like the thickness, 90 into 60 into 6, right? So we subtract half of it into 6. And beta is one, this formula. So the W width of the outstanding leg is 60. The WT is 50 here, because that is the gauge. The gauge is this G, right? So that is 50 for the first case. We are considering case A. So that is 50. The shear leg width is W plus WT minus T. So 60 plus 50 minus 6. 6 is the thickness of the angle. And LC is 3 into 50. So okay, this is the LC, like the length from the far, like from the end to end bolts, that the center of the this bolt to the center of the other end bolt. So that's 50 into plus 50 plus 50 here. And so beta here is 1.0787. And there is another criteria also given, that it has to be greater than zero point 0.7 and lesser than this value. So like those are the upper bounds. In case the beta comes less than like zero point 0.7 somewhere, we have to take minimum zero point 0.7. So this is what we are taking here. So TDN is, we put in all the values and we get to 237. And the block shear strength, failure may occur in the direction 1 2 3. So like this since there are two, there are no, like there is only one bolt hole line, so bolt line. So this is a kind of block that might shear off. So the for 16 dia bolt, the bolt hole diameter is 18 So the tearing length in tension is, so this is 90 and this G is 50. So this 2 3 length is 40, right? So 40. The gross area in shear is, which part am I concerned with? I'm concerned with this line 1 2. So 150 plus 35. And when I'm taking the net area in shear, I have to subtract 1 2 3 3.5 bolt holes. So 150 plus 35 into 6 is the gross area in shear, and the net area in shear is 150 plus 35 minus 3.5 into 18 into 6. 6 is the thickness. Gross area in tension will be 40 into 6, and the net area will be from 40. I have to subtract 1 radius, so minus 0.5 into 18. So the gross area in tension is 40 into 6. Net area in tension is 40 minus 0.5 into 18 into 6. So these are the values we put in the same, in the exact same formula as before. Put in the corresponding values and we get 16, the minimum of these two as 165. So the strength of the angle, 90 into 16 to 6, when 60, when this will be 90, when 90 is the connected leg, is this. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. So for when the 90 is connected, this is my capacity 179. And then when when 60 is connected and the 90 is outstanding, the steps will be exactly the same, just the sum of the values will be different. So here we see it's 165. So it's seen that if I connect the wider length to the cassette plate, the tension capacity will be larger mostly. Are there any doubts here? Okay, so these are the two main types of questions, the plates and the angles. There are some other examples which you can go through the slides which have been uploaded. And if there are any doubts, you can ask about tension members. Next class is compression members, I think. Okay, if there are no questions, I'll end the class. We'll meet again next class.
Okay.
Thank you.